May 8th, 1942. The Coral Sea boiled with fire. The carrier USS Yorktown, CV-5, shuddered beneath the impact of a Japanese 250-kilogram bomb. Metal screamed, smoke billowed from her flight deck, and crewmen scrambled to contain the inferno. Chief Petty Officer Walter Brannan remembered. You could feel her bones groan. Every blast was like a hammer driving into your chest. The Battle of the Coral Sea was the first naval engagement fought entirely by aircraft, ship against ship. Unseen beyond the horizon, Yorktown's air group, led by Commander Oscar Pedersen, had struck the Japanese carrier Shukaku, setting her ablaze. But victory came at a price. Fires ripped through Yorktown's hangars, her flight deck was gouged open, and the ship listed ominously to port. When the last plane landed, she was limping, but alive. As the carrier turned south toward Pearl Harbor, damage control crews worked around the clock. Pumps roared. Buckets of seawater sloshed across decks slick with oil. Men collapsed from exhaustion and heat. Lieutenant Commander Clarence McCluskey, her air group leader, recalled seeing the once proud ship looking like a floating scrapyard. By the time Yorktown entered Pearl Harbor on May the 27th, naval engineers assessed the damage. A 25-foot gash amidships, wrecked elevators, ruptured boilers, and a fractured flight deck. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz himself came aboard to inspect. The shipyard commander estimated 3 months of repairs. Nimitz glanced at his watch. "You have 3 days," he said quietly. The clock began ticking. In dry dock number 1, more than 1,400 shipyard workers swarmed over Yorktown. Welders sent cascades of sparks into the night air. Riveters hammered relentlessly. Cables and cranes swung over the harbour like giant mechanical limbs. Crews worked in 24-hour shifts, sleeping in their overalls, eating in the shadow of the carrier they were racing to resurrect. On the morning of May 30th, just 72 hours later, Yorktown's scars were patched, her engines restored, her deck made whole. She wasn't pretty. Battle scars were merely painted over, but she could fight. One sailor muttered as she pulled out to sea, "We're held together by hope and chewing gum." Nimitz watched from the pier as she steamed out toward the horizon. He knew where she was headed, to a tiny atoll called Midway, where the fate of the Pacific would be decided. June 4th, 1942. Dawn broke over the Midway atoll, a scattered ring of coral and sand in the vast blue emptiness of the Pacific. The sea was calm, deceptively peaceful. Far to the northwest, 4 Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, advanced in formation. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's grand plan was unfolding: lure the remaining American carriers into a trap and annihilate them. Intelligence told him Yorktown was gone, sunk at Coral Sea. His fleet was confident. But 200 miles to the east, the USS Yorktown sailed again, patched and ready, alongside Enterprise and Hornet. Her flight deck crews, many still nursing burns and bruises from Coral Sea, painted new flight markings as the morning light crept across the ocean. Commander Jack Dusty Clyce adjusted his goggles in the ready room, murmuring a prayer. "Gentlemen," said Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, commander of Task Force 17, "the enemy believes Yorktown is sunk. Let's make sure they regret that assumption." At 6:30 a.m., radar on Midway's island outpost detected the incoming Japanese airstrike. Sirens wailed. US fighters scrambled from the island's airstrip. As Japanese bombs rained down, smoke pillars rose high enough to be seen by the task forces offshore. Fletcher ordered Yorktown's planes airborne. SBD Dauntless dive bombers launched one after another, engines roaring like thunder. From the sky, the Pacific looked endless, a blue void where death could come at any moment. At 10:22 a.m., Lieutenant Commander McCluskey, flying from Enterprise, spotted a faint white wake slicing across the sea. The destroyer Arashi, racing to rejoin the Japanese fleet. He followed it. Moments later, the American squadrons burst out of the clouds above the Japanese carriers. What followed became legend. In less than 6 minutes, 3 of Japan's carriers, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, were turned into burning wrecks. Fuel lines erupted, Aircraft exploded on their decks, and the sea below was littered with burning debris. Japanese sailors leapt overboard, their fleet engulfed in flames. But the fight wasn't over. The lone surviving Japanese carrier, Hiryu, launched a desperate counterstrike. Her target, the USS Yorktown. At 12:20 p.m., the shriek of sirens echoed across Yorktown's decks. Lookouts shouted from the mast, "Bandits inbound! 20 plus, bearing north!" Dive bombers from Hiryu plunged out of the sun. The first bomb tore through Yorktown's flight deck and detonated in the hangar bay, igniting fuel lines. A second hit amidships. The carrier heaved violently, throwing sailors off their feet. "Fire on the hangar deck! Damage control teams, move!" Lieutenant Commander Oscar Pedersen shouted through the smoke. Men dragged hoses across the molten steel, their boots melting as they ran. The ship listed 9 degrees to port. By 2 p.m., flames were under control. Somehow, miraculously, Yorktown still floated. Fletcher gave the order to relaunch fighters. "We're not done yet," he said grimly. But Hiryu wasn't finished either. At 3:30 p.m., a second wave of Japanese torpedo planes appeared, skimming low over the waves. Yorktown's gunners opened fire, 5-inch shells booming, the air filled with tracers, smoke, and the roar of engines. 2 torpedoes slammed into her side. The ship lurched, water pouring into ruptured compartments. "Abandon ship," came the final order. Crewmen lined the rails, jumping into the oily sea as rescue destroyers moved in. From a distance, sailors aboard USS Hammond looked back and saw her, proud, battered, defiant, listing heavily but refusing to die. Even in her death throes, Yorktown had played her role. The Japanese believed 2 separate American carriers had been hit, proof, they thought, of a larger US fleet. That confusion forced Admiral Nagumo to hesitate, and in that hesitation lay Japan's defeat. By June 7th, as the smoke cleared over the Pacific, all 4 Japanese carriers were gone. Midway was saved. The tide of war had turned. Yorktown finally slipped beneath the waves at dawn on June 7th, 1942. A slow, graceful descent into the deep. Many of her crew wept as they watched her go. The ship that refused to die. More than half a century later, in 1998, oceanographer Robert Ballard found her resting on the seabed, 3 miles below, her hull still upright, flight deck scarred but intact. A silent monument to courage, speed, and an impossible repair that changed the course of history.